Greetings and welcome to my lecture on Chapter 2, Trait Factor Theories. So overview, we go over the introduction to the theory, historical roots, Frank Parsons, some trait factor theories and persons involved in theory development, and then application to that cast of clients from the Chapter 1 lecture. Okay, so career development theories. They're an attempt to provide answers to the following questions. So how do people make occupational and career choices? How do they do that? How do they figure it out? Why is any given person better suited to some occupations and careers than to others? What makes someone better at being a welder versus a counselor versus an accountant versus an IT person? What factors contribute to a person's level of success and satisfaction in a given occupation or career? What helps somebody be happy with whatever they're doing? And how can counselors help make people make career choices that are most likely to result in their success and satisfaction? How do we do that, right? We really want to help. That's why we're becoming counselors probably, right? We want to be helpers. And so we want to know, how can I do that? How do I help somebody make the right choice for them? Well, theories help you with doing that, figuring that out. So these theories all have something to offer, and you can view them as complementary rather than competing. So it's not so much one might be better than the other necessarily, and that's like some kind of race in that sense or competition. It's they complement each other. They add to each other, maybe what others don't have. So historical roots, industrial revolution, we talked about that, and I talked about that in the last lecture. Differential psychology and standardized testing movement also was something that played a role in that, where there was more evaluations available. Early pioneers were Jesse B. Davis, who is involved in schools, E.G. Williamson involved in colleges, and Frank Parsons was out in the community, right? He went from the riches to rags, right? He's considered the father of counseling. He opened the Breadwinners Institute, also known as the Boston Vocational Bureau. And as mentioned last lecture, he wrote the book, Choosing a Vocation. So fundamental beliefs. So what is your reaction to these beliefs? I want you to be thinking about this while we go through it. Do you agree or disagree? It is better to choose a vocation than merely to hunt for a job. Yeah, I don't really agree with that, because you can start in a vocation, it just isn't a good fit. And so you'd rather go out and hunt and find something interesting you've never done before, maybe change it up, right? 2, no one should choose a vocation without careful self-analysis, thorough, honest, and under guidance. I mean, in a way, I can see how that would be really important, maybe for somebody that doesn't have a lot of life experience, so maybe they need some help figuring it out. But I don't see it true in every case. A lot of people are self-starters. They can Google or YouTube how to do something themselves, teach themselves lots of things, right? 3, the youth should have a large survey of the field of vocations and not simply drop into the convenient or accidental position. Should language is shame language, in my opinion. So I already don't like that because the word should. But you never know. Sometimes what the youth has access to is only what's convenient or accidental. So I wouldn't say that they should avoid that. Excuse me. Sorry. So I don't like the word should. And sometimes all that's available is what's convenient and accidental, right? Like, for example, I didn't mean to end up at the probation department when I worked there. I thought I was applying to work at or at the residential facility. I thought I was going to apply for like residential treatment for people with schizophrenia, like really severe mental health, like they're disabled. That's what I thought I was applying for. And I get to my interview and they're like, so what makes you want to work with felony and misdemeanor drug offenders on probation for Harris County? I said, what? Right. I didn't say that. I said it in my head. I was like, what the heck, where am I? Like, I did not realize that. So I accidentally fell into forensic counseling and I ended up really loving it. I didn't ever think I would work at probation or with any kind of forensic anything. And I loved it. So sometimes accidents turn into some of our greatest growth. Number 4, expert advice or the advice of men who have made a careful study of men and vocations and the conditions of success must be better and safer for a young man than the absence of it. Better to have expert advice than none. That's what that's saying. Well, I mean, it depends on the attitudes of this expert, right? What are their morals? What are their values? Do they hold an egalitarian view about men and women have equal rights in the workplace? Are they old fashioned where women are subordinates and men are superior? Right? Are you part of the LGBTQ plus community and that person's not approving of that, this expert? These are all things that can have an impact on the way that maybe advice is given or withheld, right? So yeah, expert advice, yeah, it's great, but not always depending what the advice is. So it depends on like all of these pretty much. Number 5, putting it down on paper seems like a simple matter, but it is one of supreme importance in study. Not always necessary, but I kind of like to think about our brains as like tornadoes, and ideas and stressors and things we need to do are like sticky notes blowing in the tornado. And so putting things on paper is a way to like organize all of that. So I think putting things on paper can be very, very useful. It's also helpful not to forget stuff. It's helpful to weigh pros and cons and see if there's differentiation in the amount of pros or cons for something, which is involved in cost benefit analysis where you do pros and cons in like a grid. But yeah, you can definitely in the chat, if you want to pause this and go in the comment section and answer these questions, what you think, kind of like how I did. You're so welcome and invited to do that and start a conversation if you'd like. Okay, so Frank Parsons theory. So these 3 steps are still foundation of the trait factor approach. So step 1 is understanding yourself. So understand your aptitudes, abilities, interests, resource limitations, and other qualities. Step 2 is understand the world of work. So what are the requirements and conditions of success? What are the advantages and disadvantages? What about compensation? What about opportunities? What about prospects in different lines of work? Right? One of my favorite things to recommend for clients to do that don't know what they want to do is to go to like indeed.com or monster.com or LinkedIn, or usajobs.gov, any of these different kinds of career websites, and put in a particular salary they want to make and just scroll what's available. They might come across something they didn't even know was a job. I'll tell you one show that taught me about jobs I never heard of or thought about was Micro's Dirty Jobs. I don't know if any of you guys have seen those. I'm just like, oh my God, someone's paid to go into a septic tank. Are you kidding? Right? Like there's all these things you just can't even believe are actual jobs. But yeah, that's one of my favorite ways to help people figure out what they want to do is just scroll without any limitations of teaching or whatever they've usually done. Just put an amount of money they want to make and scroll, or even don't do that and just scroll. Just go see what's out there. And then step 3 is use true reasoning to find a good match between you and the world of work. So I would almost say this is kind of like taking the checklist on the first date. Does the person check the boxes, right? What does reasoning tell you? Is this job a good match for morals, values, income, work values? Is the environment healthy? How close is it to your house? All the things. Does it check the boxes for you? So trait factor approaches, it's also called the Minnesota point of view. And there are primary theories by Frank Parsons, E.G. Williamson, John Holland, and Dawes and Lofquist. So Frank Parsons came up with 3 steps. Williamson came up with 6 during the Great Depression. Holland had the person environment fit theory, and Dawes and Lofquist had the theory of work adjustment, which of course are expanded upon in your text. So the trait factor approaches frequently utilize standardized tests and inventories to measure person traits, which grew out of that previously mentioned differential psychology and testing movement. So like I said before, Williamson was in the college setting and he wrote How to Counsel Students in 1939. He identified 6 steps of career counseling, which are analysis, where you collect data, Synthesis, which is you organize and summarize the data. Diagnosis, where you help to describe the problem and the client, and helping them identify, do they have no choice? Is there an uncertain choice? Do they have an unwise choice in front of them? Or is there a discrepancy between their interests and their aptitudes? And then what's the prognosis? What's the degree of success for them? What would be something that would help them be successful in their career path? Do they need to switch to business major? Do they need to switch to education? Do they need to switch to math? Whatever. And then the counseling piece, which is helping the client identify options and the likelihood of their success, and then following up. Right? So basically helping a college student work through the struggle of what should my major be, is where his career theory, trait factor theory started. Application list or application activities is totally optional. So if you want to, you can pause this video after I finish reading the instructions and see what you think. So quickly list 20 things you love to do. And then list the 10 tasks that you've enjoyed doing the most at your current or former job. And you can even code each task as you listen to and participate in the part about Holland's person environment fit theory. So these are just things that can help you identify, do I like where I work? Do I get to do things that I enjoy at my job? Or do I want to find a job that offers more of what I like to do? Like maybe you love watching comedy. Do you get to crack a lot of jokes with coworkers? Like, you know, not every environment's going to allow for that, because if you work at a trauma center, I don't know that laughing would be so appropriate so often. But I mean, hey, you know, humor does get used in counseling for sure. So yeah, look at 20 things you love to do and tasks you love at your former or current job. And then you can code those things in terms of the Holland codes. Okay, so Holland's Hexagon. If you've already read the book, you already know what this is. If not, you're learning about it. The way to remember it is RIASEC. That's how I remember it. RIASEC, RIASEC. So what are those letters? What do they mean? So people in model work environments can be classified as being most like the following things. RIASEC, right? Realistic, which is your doer. Investigative, which is the scientist. Artistic, which is a creator. Social is the helper. Enterprising is the persuader. Conventional is the systematizer. And tables 2.5 and 2.6 in your book are useful. I found this image online. Something you're going to learn about me is I love images. I love visuals. They just help me kind of photographic memory, memorize, remember stuff, as like, oh yeah, that's what that chart looked like. So I like to offer visual graphics for people too, instead of just talking, you know, because people learn in different ways: kinetic, auditory, visual. Okay, so you can see some different adjectives used for describing each of these letters, right? So you can pause it and look more closely at this if you want to. But these are different things that you can identify for each of these different letters. RIASEC, RIASEC, right? Okay, so what the Holland Code is it refers to the strongest 2 or 3 letters on the hexagon that reflect a person's interests and personality. So SA or CIR. So going backwards, SA would be social and artistic are their strongest. Okay. Or CIR would be conventional, investigative, and realistic are their strongest 3. Right. So whenever you see a Holland Code, that's what that means. And whatever is first is the strongest. Okay. So person environment fit. So congruent. So the more congruent, the greater the similarities between a person and other people in their environment, and the greater someone's satisfaction is going to be. So congruence means agreement. And you want to have that agreement I guess just congruence is maybe the word to say. So it's also the fit between an individual's personality type and their current or prospective work environment. So how alike are they, right? If the person's an RIA, is the work environment an RIA, right? Consistency in calculus. So the more similar the types are, the more consistent they are and the closer they are on the hexagon, which is that picture I just showed you a minute ago. This is the hexagon. How close together the person's letter on the hexagon with Holland's theory is the consistency is the degree of relatedness between the types. So calculus, this concept is directly related to the hexagonal shape and specifies that the greater the distance between any two types, the less similar and less theoretically related those two types are. So that's to say, these three together are stronger than this CIS, right? So CRI, or these three being together, is stronger than EAR. Ear. Okay. Differentiation. So the most differentiated interests are the clear, the hierarchy of preferences. How strongly a person favors one letter or a couple letters helps with differentiation between the interests. So identity is reflected by clear and more stable goals, interests, and talents. So you can see a person's identity when those things are very clear. They're very straightforward. They're very observable, perhaps, or distinct. Okay, so RIASEC assessments. Oh, there's that RIASEC again. Self-directed search, strong interest inventory, and the career key are things you can do to look at someone's RIASEC. So here's another application activity that's optional. So in the week to come, your task is going to, as an idea, is to take notice of workers you encounter and apply Holland's typology. So you don't have to do this, but try to take note of at least one coworker if you have a job, right? And be like, wonder what their Holland code might be. And you can compare them to the hexagon. Using that worksheet, you can jot down basic job title for that worker and identify the type of workplace in which you encountered him or her. Also, you can make your best guess about the code. And later you can go to 1tonline.org and type the name of the job title in the search and the occupation most similar to that worker you encountered. Scroll down or click on interest to determine the official code for that occupation. Enter this code in the column for confirmed code, or take the test yourself if you're not currently working and reflect on the results you discover. Which, quick little insight here, that may or may not be something I ask you about at the end, to guess what your code would be without taking the test first. So maybe wait, don't do it just yet. Okay. Theory of work adjustment. So another major trait factor theory focused on the correspondence or match between a person and their environment, also known as the TWA Minnesota theory work adjustment, or the person correspondence theory, which was developed by Dawes and Lofquist. It was developed in the context of vocational rehabilitation, preparing people with disabilities for employment. So two issues that they closely examined were satisfaction of the worker and the satisfactoriness of the worker. Key constructs here were person traits, environment factors, correspondence, satisfaction, and satisfactoriness. And the models that were developed were the TWA Predictive Model, process model, and then the adjustment styles, adjustment behaviors within that process model, as well as assessment. So person traits. So person traits are considered their needs and their values, and they affect a person's satisfaction. So one of the things I've told many of my clients, and I'll continue to tell many of my clients that I work with, excuse me, is that the quickest way, living your life out of alignment with your morals and values is the quickest way to an anxiety or a depression problem. So if it's really important to you to be honest and you're lying left and right, probably gonna have some anxiety or some depression going on. If it's really important for you to be monogamous and you keep cheating on your partner and you've had multiple partners, that's going to cause some anxiety and depression because you're acting out of alignment with your values, right? Likewise, career counseling, we have values as workers, right? And some different things examined by them were achievement, recognition, support, independence, relationships, working conditions. And there's some different ways to understand each of those things in the parentheses next to them. So for achievement, ability utilization, right? How able are you to use your abilities? Recognition, do you get advancement? Do you get recognized? Do you have authority in the workplace? Do you get told good job? Do you get a raise? Do you get a gift card? Do you get an extra day off? Do you get to wear casual Friday jeans when everyone else has to wear whatever the recognition might look like? Support. So are company policies and practices upheld? Is there supervision? Are there human relationships? Is there supervision and supervision's twice? Is there technical support, right? For independence, do you get to be creative? Do you get to have responsibility? Do you have autonomy, or are you micromanaged, right? I don't like micromanagement. I don't know about you guys, but I don't appreciate it. Relationships, are relationship values met at your place of employment, right? Do you have coworkers, social service, moral values that's examined and visible? And lastly, for working conditions, is there activity? Do you have independence? Is there variety, or is it monotonous? So same thing over and over and over again. Maybe that's what you want, but maybe you're somebody like me that would appreciate variety and not getting bored doing the same thing over and over and over again. Compensation, is it sufficient? And do you have job security? Or that could literally look like, is there security officers where you work, where you're kept safe, right? Like if you work at a jail, it'd be important that you have security there, right? Not just left to go do counseling in the jail and frolic about, right? You'd want to know there's some safety, right? So these are person traits. Some further person traits are skills and abilities, which affect someone's satisfactoriness. Style variables affect a person's judgment, adjustment behaviors. So being I don't know why that's repeated. I feel like this copied stuff when I saved it or something. But they affect a person's adjustment behaviors. So being a celebrity, pace, rhythm, endurance. DAWS identifies and defines the 4 style variables as celerity, refers to how quickly P typically responds, so pace. Pace is how much energy P typically expends per unit time. P is supposed to be person. Rhythm refers to the typical pattern of pace over time, and endurance is how long P can typically maintain response. So what is your working style? What is your celerity, pace, rhythm, and endurance like in the working workforce? And that's something absolutely that you can help a client with figuring out. What's your endurance level? You know, if you've got somebody with chronic pain in front of you, their endurance is going to look a lot different from somebody that does marathons every month or every few months or whatever, right? So you want to be paying attention to these things for clients. How well do you respond to things? How much energy can you handle expending? How much can you handle these things, right? It's helping them figuring out their career by looking at these style variables. Okay, next slide. So work environment traits are the other piece. So reinforcers. So what are reinforcers? Reinforcers are things that reinforce your desire to be at your job. So like when I worked at a psychiatric hospital, they did Helpers Appreciation Week, and they catered lunch for us every day of the week for counselors and nurses at a psychiatric hospital. And then they did just a counselors week one week, and they did a little raffle just for the counselors at the hospital. And then they did a nurses week, and the nurses were only involved in that one. And so on and so forth. So it was things that are meant to boost your motivation to still be at your job. So this could be a coupon that you get. It could be free food. It could be a t-shirt. It could be a bonus. It could be literally anything that makes you still want to work there. So work environment traits, does a job offer reinforcers? And do they satisfy the workers' needs and values? Right? Like if I've been expected to stay late for 2 months straight because an audit is happening, and I never even get told thank you or good job, those are reinforcers that I would need for basically jeopardizing my health by burning myself out to accomplish a goal for this company. Thank you goes a long, 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 long way. And in that kind of situation, I would expect some kind of free breakfast, kolaches or something. Like that's an insane amount of work for little reinforcement or thanks. So that's something to think about. Does your job honor those things? And unfortunately, when I worked in counseling environments, I've had bosses that didn't do reinforcers. They were very negative. They were very cold. They were very rude. So just because it's a supervisor or a boss somewhere in some way doesn't mean they're like that everywhere. It's important to find an environment that is healthy for you mentally and physically, and for your clients, helping them do the same. Okay, so skill and ability requirements. Are workers' skills and abilities satisfactory? So do they have enough trainings with Microsoft or Adobe or whatever to be able to hold a job, to be able to get a job? And then environmental style. Is there a good fit between worker style and environmental style requirements of the workplace, right? So satisfaction and satisfactoriness, those are different things. So satisfaction is the goodness of fit between a person's needs and values and the types of reward and reinforcers offered by a particular work environment. Satisfactoriness is the goodness of fit between a person's skills and abilities and the work environment's skill requirements. So they are close, but they're cousins, if you will, but they are different. Okay. So the TWA person traits and environment factors here. So this is basically everything I just went over, but in a little chart. Love a good chart. So these are the person's traits. These are environmental factors. And these are the variables affected by the level of correspondence agreement between them, right? Okay, so the two TWA models are predictive model and the process model. So predictive model, TWA predicts that the level of correspondence between a person's traits and the work environment is directly related to the level of satisfaction a person experiences in a given job and the degree to which a person is deemed satisfactory on the job. So keyword predicts here, right? So the process model begins where the predictive model leaves off. It is specifically interested in the process of work adjustment and seeks to answer the question, what happens when a worker is dissatisfied or unsatisfactory? Right? So this is trying to figure it out, and this is measuring it, right? So here is a fancy dancy image that I found online of the TWA predictive model, which who doesn't love a good image? I love images, as I've said. And this is a way for you to help yourself remember how these different things work. So you can take a screenshot of this. If you have a Mac, that would be Command-Shift-3. If you're on Windows, it would be, I believe, Control Print Screen, which is above the arrows. Or you can look that up right there, Minnesota. That's the little citation right there. But you can just see how correspondence leads to these things versus discorrespondence leads to these different things. So it's just another way to help you understand how these things interact to create a work outcome. Okay, zoom out a little bit. Okay, so TWA adjustment styles. So I'm going to adjust that a little bit because it looks a little stretched. So colloquial expressions. So put up with it. The adjustment style would be flexibility there. And that has to do with how long a person can tolerate a lack of correspondence before engaging in adjustment behavior. So what is the extent to which I can put up with my boss yelling at me before I make a change? Okay, if the expressions change them, the adjustment style will be activeness, and it involves attempts to change the nature of your work environment. Change yourself is reactiveness. So adjustment behavior involving attempts to change your own self to make the work environment work. And then keep trying has to do with perseverance. So how long you engage in adjustment behaviors before you leave a situation. So how long can you handle still asking your boss not to yell at you, still asking your boss not to micromanage, right? All these different things. So that's what those things have to do with. And continuing on. So here's another image that I found. Okay, TWA process model. Right, so that's another thing you can screenshot if you want, or you can just look at it in this moment, pause it. You don't necessarily have to save it, but it's looking at, is the person satisfied with the environment? No. Yes. No, they gotta be flexible. Can they be flexible? No, they need to adjust. Okay, they either have a reactive adjustment or an active adjustment. Right? And it goes back, are they satisfied yet? Right? And you can just follow the arrows to see how this works. Okay. Okay, next slide. Okay, so these are some different assessments, TWA assessments. So the Minnesota Importance Questionnaire helps with values and needs assessments. The General Aptitude Test Battery helps with skills and abilities. The Minnesota Job Description Questionnaire helps with identifying reinforcers. And the Occupational Aptitude Pattern helps with skill and ability requirements. Then for outcomes, you can look at the Minnesota Satisfaction Questionnaire as well as the Satisfactoriness scales. this is another application exercise that you can do where you're applying what you're learning. So you can do a work importance locator through doing a card sort of needs and values assessment, which is also available through ONET free of charge. So you can use this website right here if you want to go and do it. But basically what you do is you identify what are your 20, so 4 times 5, what are your 20 most important work values, right? And it helps you with sorting that out and figuring out what that looks like. And so these are the instructions for doing the card sort. If you want to do it, you can pause this and read all that. I'm not going to read all that to you. But here is a work value worksheet. So this is how you would maybe discover under achievement, independence, recognition, working conditions, support, relationships, what's most important to you. So this is like a sample scoring sheet. Okay, and then what you can do is you can go back to lecture 1, or you can pull up your PowerPoints from chapter 1 and think about how you can apply any or all of what we just talked about in this lecture to Wayne, Lee May, Lakeisha, Vincent, Doris, Jillian, and Juan. How can all this be applied to those guys, right? And then as a final slide with some questions for the comments. Number 1, if you had to guess what your Holland Code was without taking the test, what would you think it is and why? You can also go take it and then say, this is what I thought, and then I took it and this was my score. And you can reflect on that if you'd like. The more interactive you are with the material, the better I think it helps to stick it, to make it stick in your mind. And then number 2, do you think either person traits or working environment traits are more important, or are they equally important? If so, why? Whatever one you think. Please feel free to leave your answers in the comment section below. And thank you for attending my lecture. I'll see you in the next one.